Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Innovators of Public Safety podcast. Today, we have an awesome episode in store with two amazing guests. The first is Garrett Smith of Reveal Technology. He's the founder and CEO at Reveal. Importantly, he's also a professional mentor of mine. Garrett was the first person I worked for after I left the Navy out of active duty, where I served as a glorified intern helping launch their legislative engagement function at Reveal. Reveal is a pretty cool company with an awesome backstory that we're going to get to in the pod. But the short version is they make a piece of software called Farsight that helps special forces and regular infantry do tactical battlefield intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations. It's also, importantly for this audience, got a direct application to public safety tactical teams. So think SWAT and a bunch of the other use cases for when you need on the ground intelligence, prior to major events and things like that. Garrett holds master's degree from Stanford, a bachelor's degree from BYU, and is based out of Montana, where he runs Reveal Tech. And he's joined today by the director of his law enforcement and public safety sales operation, Courtney Donowho. She's based out of Whitefish, Montana, and has a long and storied career in helping public safety agencies acquire the best and brightest technology that they can. I think you'll enjoy this conversation immensely. I know I did. And I look forward to hearing your reactions. Thanks.
Garrett, I thought, now that we've all been introduced, that we'd start a little bit of conversation just around like the core of Reveal Technology. You and Courtney are guests on this podcast that's about the innovation of public safety, but you and I obviously met each other through Reveal Tech first, and that started in a little bit of a different field. So just for audience members, can you tell us what Reveal is and how you founded it?
Yeah, totally. And thanks for having us on. Always excited to celebrate, innovations in what I think we all understand to be really important and critical mission-driven fields. And I'll say at the outset, I feel incredibly privileged to associate with, people like you, people like Courtney, in doing something important. And that I realize that most people in the world probably don't have the privilege of waking up and doing something important and extremely fun all in the same job. And I think that's one of the many benefits that our industries of chosen profession afford us, and I just feel really grateful. So Reveal Technology, it really has its origins in combat tactical experiences that I had and others of our co-founding and leadership team had over the course of the global war on terror, which I know that might or might not connect with the vast majority of your audience, but I'll say that as things evolved, we became convinced that set of experiences is not unique to the combat battlefield. It's actually the daily lives of public safety and law enforcement officers and first responders. And so it ended up becoming, a platform where we could generate and deliver value to not only the defense market and the problems and challenges that those professionals encounter every day, but also the law enforcement, public safety, first responder set. So the origins are such that, we had very personal experiences in combat that informed a perspective on how things could be better, right? Like on too many occasions when I was a Marine leader and I was taking, Marines around the corner and into harm's way into a variety of high-risk scenarios, I would do it with nothing really better than an outdated low-resolution 1 in 50,000 topographic, map
or worse, like the sand maps that you draw in the sand.
Sand maps, or like, we'd like dig holes in the ground and use the dirt to like model out what the terrain looked like, and hatch boxes for buildings and that sort of thing. So anyhow, fast forward a number of years after surviving and making do, and even like having success in that kind of an environment, people like me, people like you, people like Courtney found ourselves confronted by the emergence of incredible technology in the commercial, consumer, prosumer worlds that we immediately saw as solutions to problems that we've all encountered in our kind of former professional lives. And that really is the origin story of Reveal. So 6 years ago, my co-founders and I had a thesis around building software that could drastically improve the decision-making and risk profile of that tactical environment for people who looked a lot like us. And I think you and Courtney and others in the public safety arena feel the same way. When you see a really cool piece of consumer tech, you think immediately, my gosh, how could I use that to do better in X or Y or Z scenario? And that really is what drives us.
Yeah, that's great. And I think for the people that don't know too, I got the chance to cut my teeth in startups with Garrett at Reveal Tech when I was still, I guess, an intern while I was at the Harvard Kennedy School, and learned a lot too about selling to government. That was my first exposure to what does a government sale look like. Courtney, you deal with this every day, and it's part enterprise sales, but it's also lobbying, it's also government relations, and it was like just a really hard problem to solve. Courtney, thinking a little bit about maybe your background too, what drew you to Reveal? What are you guys building at Reveal for the public safety side of things?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, I would say what drew me to Reveal initially was two things. It would be the tool itself, Farsight. I saw it and I just thought, how does every law enforcement agency in the country not have this? It just seems.
And Courtney, before we go any
essential.
farther on that,
Yeah.
can you give us the 4-sentence description of Farsight?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a tactical tool that works with your UAVs that your agency already owns to create a really rapid 3D model that then we add a lot of amazing tactical tools to that increase officer safety. It's great for critical incidents and major event pre-planning, among many other things.
Perfect. Okay. So keep going. Tell me a little bit more about getting to Reveal and kind of what took you there.
Yeah, so I met Trevor Howard in Hawaii. Trevor is one of our favorite Reveal employees, and he was practically in the same booth with me at this conference. We were kind of shoved together, and that's how I saw Farsight. I got to know Trevor. He spoke so highly of Reveal. You could just tell he absolutely loves what he does, and so that drew me to the company, as well as just thinking, man, there's so much potential for this product in the public safety arena. So yeah, that's kind of one thing led to another. Reached out to Garrett and Andrew and asked them if they'd be open to a conversation. And yeah, we after a little bit of discussions, it was kind of decided, yeah, we should bring Farsight to law enforcement.
And maybe to jump in here, Matt, we, before encountering Courtney, had only kind of the notion that our technologies might be useful in the non-DoD, non-defense, non-military realms. We had a hunch, and Courtney brought a lot of, I'll call it, professional insight and skill and acumen to helping us build what became a year-long pilot project around taking our technologies into her industry. Yeah. And it was extremely successful, and we're grateful for people like her who can help us translate, technology tools into that context, which are obviously there's a lot of overlap, but, a lot of that use case user persona is so similar, tech environment, relatively similar, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you guys pilot first with Farsight for Cops?
I'm trying to think. I think it was Southern California, El Cajon Police, and then also with Redmond Police Department in the greater Seattle area.
Yeah, Redmond, Washington. Okay. That's my old neck of the woods.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Courtney, we first met in person in King County, right? King County Sheriff's org.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. I ended up with a lot of customers after that.
Yeah. Same. Actually, that worked out very well. For us. So, Garrett, I want to talk a little bit about the pivot though. So you guys had this idea when I was at Reveal, it was very much like we're building, tactical tools for Marines on the ground. Obviously that expanded into Army and other special operations forces. We weren't even talking about law enforcement use cases yet, though it seems obvious now. How did you guys get there? How is it different? Also, how is the use case different? Obviously, thinking about some of the tools inside of Farsight, what's actually different?
Well, I'll let Courtney talk to maybe the differences in use case. And I can do a better job, I think, explaining some of our priors that we brought into the defense, arena, and then Courtney helped us translate into, that user group. So I'll defer to her on that one. But, what drove us to even consider getting into the law enforcement and public safety market, it's kind of like an entrepreneur's dilemma a bit, right? thinking, what's the biggest possible circle that I can draw around the most applicable market with the largest total addressable market value? And you then kind of do the strategic work around market sizing and use case kind of deep dives and vetting possibilities and opportunities. And so we determined that our company had an incredible amount of potential in that market, that it was a near adjacent market to things that we were already working on, and that an expansion into that market was really mostly a go-to-market activity rather than a whole new product development initiative. I think if it was a new product development initiative, develop something out of whole cloth, that would have been probably not as attractive for us because, as you know, and as anybody in the entrepreneurial and innovation space knows, lack of focus or loss of focus in the earliest days of an innovative, endeavor can be death, right? And then you lose focus on who the user is, what the problem sets are, and all of that. And so, I'll describe maybe a slight bit around why our technology is a solution form fit for the defense user group, and then I'll let Courtney pick up from there on maybe the differences or the overlaps between that and the public safety arena. We knew that users in the military context looked a lot like what I described a few minutes ago. We lack situational awareness tools. The cognitive burden on humans in the unknown kind of high-risk environments where you don't know what's around the corner, especially in hot conflict or in gunfights, you adopt a huge amount of risk in those scenarios, huge. And if you can at once reduce the cognitive decision-making burden on the operator while enhancing situational awareness and decision-making ability, that's kind of, a holy grail type of a scenario. If you can also do that without adding yet another heavy, burdensome piece of equipment that is really difficult to use and requires a huge amount of integration with, existing or whole new systems or whatever else, you want to introduce technology innovations that are minimally disruptive, but also positive and accretive to the value proposition in that space. And so, with all of that being said, our flagship product that Courtney mentioned, Farsight, it's software. It's optimized for the smart telephony tablets and laptops that not only are military users already using, but law enforcement professionals are already carrying. So you're imposing no hardware burden. We're generating up-to-date, fresh geospatial data, call it in single-digit minutes, that allows for quick decision-making. You don't need to call back to some command center, request a product, and wait an hour or two, right? You're talking about needing to make relatively short, snappy decisions in combat operations. And then further, you're giving them incredible mission planning, visibility, and situational awareness with an up-to-date, set of mission planning and situational awareness products that allow them to make different decisions than they otherwise would in the fog of war. So we had this suspicion that the law enforcement context, think serving a warrant on, potentially violent, unknown kind of whatevers, right? Or providing event security around really complex, congested terrain amongst other humans, many of whom are civilians. You want to reduce the possibility of collateral problems, et cetera, et cetera. Those all seemed overlapping enough to inspire us to think about this. And maybe I'll let Courtney pick up from there.
Yeah, it's like Garrett said. I mean, the ease of use was incredible. And also the product really did not need any adjustments for us to be able to bring it to law enforcement. It was all about just the delivery and understanding their use cases and how the different tools were going to apply to their daily lives and assist with, that effective decision-making and ultimately keeping people alive. And so, yeah, it was a very easy kind of transition. And, and it was very interesting because the more people I showed it to, the more people that got their hands on Farsight, the more use cases that they told me about that, I hadn't even thought of, but that were already in the product. And, that was kind of where the major event pre-planning came from. Was one of my prospects in St. Louis said, do you know how many presidential candidate visits we have coming up over the next, year? He's like, this would be a game changer for us. And at the time I was really pitching it as primarily a critical incident, very fast response type of tool. And, now I would say major event pre-planning is almost more heavily used by our customers using Farsight than would be the critical incident. But I mean, it's great for both. But yeah, the more people you show it to, the more applications.
Yeah, we've noticed that too, even just as people use Bulletin, our software, that like they start, I don't want to use the word contort, but they start contorting the software to do things that you didn't expect them to do at all. So for instance, we make, Bulletin helps issue bolos and attempt to locates and things like that. And they've started using it for tactical reporting from the field, like from the cell phone, sharing a missing person and saying, hey, I just checked the last known location, and then making updates on the fly there, completely unplanned. And it's actually spurned a lot of product development based on what these users are doing. And like, you can't ask for better feedback, I guess, than doing that. So I had written down, go ahead, Garrett.
That's almost like that dynamic that you see in video gaming, and not to tie too many different things here together, but there's this whole notion of emergent gameplay, right? Where you have a relatively flexible environment in which people can engage, and they start using it in creative ways, and things that the designers of the game or the product never intended then become almost feature level capabilities in the product. I think that's when you've struck gold, right? When users are not only using it the way you intended, but starting to push the boundaries. And it's the perfect mix of like high customer uptake, sticky customer usage, and positive or constructive user feedback. I mean, that's gold.
Yeah. Real talk, Garrett. What kind of games do you play? That's what I want to know.
If I had time to play games, I would give you a list. I am a gamer though, unabashed gamer over here. I love video games.
Me too. Courtney, are you a gamer?
Not at all. I'm on a computer all day long. That's the last thing I feel like doing when I'm done with work. No.
Absolutely not. Well, I know Garrett's got like, son right around the right age to be kind of into computer games, video games, Fortnite, that type of stuff.
Son and a daughter. We're all gamers. Yeah. Wife's a gamer. We're gamers. It's great.
Yeah. Courtney, this next kind of thing, you said something kind of jogged my memory. Selling software, right? Where the nice thing is you aren't selling hardware, although I know you guys have played with doing both. Just like in DoD, like the organization itself is really good at buying tanks and airplanes and things like that. And then in law enforcement, if you want to sell a patrol car, that's easy. All right, here you go. I need $80,000 to get a new patrol car and put everything in it, put an MDT in there. That's good to go. When you walk up to the agency and you say, hey, a license costs XYZ, and you're just delivering software, have you run into, like, I guess, how is that received? I'm sure some agencies are quite good at buying software, but I personally have run into like the entire gamut of kind of level of sophistication at the procurement level.
Absolutely. So I would say that is a result. It's almost generational right now. So I am a very, very late Gen Xer. And when I was in law enforcement, I worked for primarily boomers. And so now you're kind of seeing that transition where, some Gen Xers are not necessarily tech embracing, I wouldn't call them, but we're kind of seeing that now. The Gen Xers and the boomers are, as they're kind of progressing in their careers out of law enforcement and retiring, we're seeing millennials taking over. And, that just unabashed embrace of technology it's amazing. It's so refreshing. I love it because I'm hearing now from a lot of different agencies where they're saying, no, I want my people to have the best tech out there. I want to be the most tech forward agency in the country. In years past, we would have never heard that. All tech was a bit suspicious. Drones were more niche. Yeah, so you still encounter that every once in a while, but I do find that we are in a transition period where we're getting to where it's just generations that grew up and technology was part of everyday life and they're great with it. They're starting to take the helm.
If I can jump in, Matt, as you and I and other folks who've been involved with and been critical of even defense innovation or the lack of, right? I think there's this unfortunate dynamic that only the prospect of hot war or conflict or the reality of hot war and hot conflict can inspire the kind of like generational upheaval and innovation that many of us kind of long to see. Not long to see conflict, I long to see a better defense posture and better equipping and all that stuff. And so I would say, and Courtney, chime in here, I might be right or wrong. You observed this at kind of firsthand in a way that I did not. last year when the presidential or the attempted presidential assassination went down with former President Trump on the campaign trail at Butler Farms in Pennsylvania. And all of a sudden, the Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies who were there on the scene received kind of the Eye of Sauron public scrutiny. Like, why were you not better prepared for this? All of a sudden, you start seeing the kind of innovation ethos bubble up in a productive way. And it's unfortunate that it takes that, but sometimes that's just the way that it rolls. And so we saw, I think in the week or week and a half after that incident, Courtney, we sent members of our team out to collect overhead drone video from the site and then recreated the site in our Farsight application and then started showing that scene and the analytic capability behind our technology that could have ameliorated and even prevented the entire situation from unfolding in the first place for, the low cost of a single license subscription to our technology, right? And it would have cost nearly nothing and would have prevented a massive incident of near catastrophic proportions. And I think it's through incidents like that, experiences and learnings like that, that really wake people up to the necessity of upgrading, moving into the future, and doing a better job with our technology and equipping. And your point about selling and software licensing versus buying hardware solutions, it's kind of near cataclysm that sometimes like sparks the fire of realization that, hey, maybe we can buy software too.
Yeah.
There's an old joke. I don't remember who told it to me, but there's an old joke that if it's black and covered in Velcro, cops will buy it. And and that to a certain extent, it's true. And I find that, in trade shows and things, there'll be these booths with the shiny objects. They create challenge coins. Everybody loves challenge coins. There's the booths with the guns. Those are always a hit, right? And so, yeah, it takes a little finesse to be able to say, hey, no, you got to check out this software.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I even noticed that just like there's a hierarchy inside of these agencies, but whether they be a real-time crime center or like a SWAT team, whatever it may be, where it's like guns and hardware, number one, vehicles, dogs, like all the things that law enforcement, it's like this outward facing stuff, even though like process, procedure, software is like really what makes money for the agency and for the DoD too. I mean, as a Navy guy, I totally understand this dichotomy. Really cool. I don't know if cool is the right word, that you guys went after the fact and captured, the site of the attempted assassination. Let's talk a little bit about that go-to-market marketing motion, like from an entrepreneur business standpoint. Like, how does that actually work? Like, that's a pretty tight loop to be like, aha, like, let's use this and point out this opportunity. I think just tactically, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are entrepreneurs in public safety and investors. So they want to kind of understand this like tight loop. How did you guys think to do that? What's the process? Do you have a marketing team? Like, what's that look like?
Well, I'll give near total credit to Courtney for, both inspiring and then making use of the kind of resulting opportunity there. But I remember seeing the news that assassination attempt had occurred and thinking to myself immediately, God, we could have saved them a lot of hassle. We could have prevented that kind of situation. How awesome would it be if we could, make some good come out of this near catastrophe by developing a case study and capturing some primary data around it, if at all possible. And I thought, well, it's probably impossible if we get there. And Courtney and I were talking, I think day of, maybe day after, thinking like, we should figure out how to get some primary data from the site so that we can, actually, demonstrate that our technology could have saved the day, basically. And so after that, it had almost zero to do with me. And we had some folks go out and capture some overhead data. And then, Courtney, you can probably pick it up from there. We started developing kind of a case study and an analytic kind of view on the Butler Farm scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of funny how that went down, because I was watching the news live. I saw it happen live, and same as Garrett. I just thought, this, what a waste. Like, this would have been so avoidable if we had Farsight. And I went on my LinkedIn and I just mentioned that, hey, I put a post on here with, I think it's a short video 6 months ago saying that Farsight would be an invaluable tool for major event pre-planning, such as presidential visits. And so I literally went into my LinkedIn and I just kind of reposted that and with a little blurb, like I said this 6 months ago, but this would have totally prevented it. And it was extraordinary. I mean, I gained thousands of connections and followers overnight. It became apparent that this wasn't just a Secret Service problem. This is a challenge that every agency in the country is dealing with, is like, I got these hordes of people. How on earth do I keep them safe? So that was really all it was, is just kind of, hey, Farsight could have helped with this. And then, doing some LinkedIn posts and things like that, to, kind of demonstrate that. And then when we got the footage, that was even more compelling, to be able to just show it's 20 to 25 seconds. I can identify the gaps in your security plan. So, I mean, that was beyond compelling. That was probably the number one most compelling thing that law enforcement saw, where all of a sudden their eyes were open to Farsight and the necessity.
Would you say, Courtney, that generally word of mouth and kind of the organic discovery process is the most important for this market, given that the market is very fragmented and decentralized? In other words, you've got agencies with like a couple of officers, you've got some agencies with thousands of officers and everything in between. And, there are tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands of such agencies and outfits and organizations across our country and elsewhere. It seems like that organic kind of word of mouth spread of information and discovery is the way that we've gone about it that's most effective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say FOMO is probably the best tool. It's funny, and it's not necessarily FOMO, but it's name recognition. It's, hey, I already know my buddy at this agency next door is using this and loving it, swears by it. That is, that endorsement is essential. Yeah. It's especially when you're bringing a brand new product to the law enforcement market. They're not quick to trust, and they don't have time for things to fail. They don't have time to, try out things. They're generally very overburdened, understaffed. And, if they are going to adopt anything, whether it's technology or otherwise, it needs to work, and they need to have confidence in it and be able to rely on it. So yeah, that endorsement is just absolutely huge.
Yeah. I've noticed this too, even in our own side of things, the referral can make or break the sales cycle too. Like, I can go out and cold prospect into law enforcement and ask a major agency in the Northwest to join Bulletin, right? And it takes me 9 months. But if that person then calls down to somewhere in Southern California and says, hey, you should check this thing out, we're talking start to finish 3 months for a contract.
An interesting dynamic, and Matt, you encounter this in your neck of the woods probably more than anybody else in your industry, but it's very difficult to sell if the positive impact of your product adoption is the absence of something happening. You know what I mean? So like, if we successfully deploy Farsight into an agency and they, by using it, do better planning and deter the bad guys from doing the thing in the first place, it's very difficult to know whether you've had an impact at all, because all you're experiencing is ho-hum safety. And so, that is the desired outcome, but also how do you evangelize that? It's a tough thing. And we deal with the same thing in the defense arena, where most of what we're doing is preparing for a hypothetical conflict in the future. And the best you can do is in many cases, point to training outcomes rather than actual real world operational outcomes. So maybe you have some experience there, but I know Courtney and I bump into that all the time.
Yeah. So if I can, like, this is the biggest hill that we're climbing right now as a company at Multitude, is educating the customers. There are many first responders that get this, I will say, but there are more that do not, which is that Intel drives ops, which drives Intel, which drives ops. Those of us from DoD knows the circle, and Courtney, you're shaking your head yes, and as well. But I have a very difficult time articulating that situational awareness is a good thing. That situational awareness can stop many things from occurring, that there is real value in a highly functional intelligence operations lifecycle, and that you need to move from reactive policing to proactive, which doesn't mean just sending more squad cars to a hotspot on a map. It means building the intelligence tools and the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, to like actually know what's going on in your community, be able to use AI to call out the weirdness that's out there, and that there's actual like economic and safety value tied up in that process. That this is not a thing, Courtney, I'll use, like you talk about like boomers, as they may understand this, but it's less about like the software tools to do this are not necessarily part of the equation, or at least in the purchasing decision.
Yeah, no, I've found selling to law enforcement is very different. It's not usually the traditional exact medic, I would say, approach of sales. I would say it needs to be very modified. Law enforcement leadership is typically not given like quarterly or annual goals like business leaders would be in the private sector, where they're expected to increase revenue by 30% or, productivity by 15%. And the closest thing I would say that they have to that is maybe just FBI crime stats. But even those, as the FBI changes the definition year over year, they can go up arbitrarily, and they're not truly comparable to last year's stats if the definitions are changing. And I mean, yeah, they're not given those kind of, business, I guess, goals they're supposed to accomplish.
KPIs, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, they're not, it's not their money. And it's very challenging to, to say fire law enforcement. So if you're telling them, you could purchase our technology and reduce your workforce by 5%, it'll save you $1 million a year on personnel spend, they are not interested whatsoever. It's really like, finding out what is their decision-making criteria. It's just going to be very, very different, I've found. But, elastic earbud, but I found it's also very similar across agencies.
What is that value proposition, Matt, that you guys have found? And sorry to reverse the script here, flip the script. I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm a closeted host myself.
I'm going to borrow closeted host.
Well, you're well out of the closet at this point, my friend. But what are those key value propositions that you guys encounter either with the bulletin product or as you just canvas the industry landscape generally? Is it cost cutting? Is it capacity expansion? Is it
it's a couple of things.
Case closure, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, case closure, if you can tie to case closure, that's a slam dunk, right? Like if I can tell you that my product's going to bump your case closure by 3% a year, like that is good. It's very difficult to do that, honestly. There's a lot of companies that do. They'll throw out case closure rate changes based on their product. I've been highly suspicious of those type of numbers.
It seems like you need pretty good and detailed longitudinal data to even start to point at that. If you're just like a hypothetical adoption, I think that's probably unethical at some level, probably.
That's right. And I don't know. There's a couple of different things. Like one is we ride the tailwinds of officers coming into leadership positions, the changing demographics, again, to Courtney's point about changing over who's in charge, of them saying, wow, we really need to get with it from a tech perspective, right? Some of that, we get caught up in that purchase mentality is like, yeah, absolutely. Like we want to buy this because this is high tech, this is high speed. We want to feel that way. Some of it, and I'm going from like least to most probably here. Some of it is, they want to use tools that feel good, like literally feel good. Mm-hmm. And that means not using Windows 2000 based products. So a product like ours with a nice GUI, that is simple, onboarding takes a day, and they can be up and running with an entirely new intelligence flow. Great. Love that. They get to feel like they did something. They get improvement. There's a million other value props. But where I think we found the most is the true, like kind of coming back to the reveal data value prop rather, is like the cognitive load that it takes to manage all of this information. So what we do is we do content recommendation a la Twitter, a la Instagram for cops, right? And so every piece of crime intel coming into their inbox, there's 50, 100, 200 a day. I'm going to tell you which 3 you need to pay attention to before you go out on the road that morning. that is a cognitive load reducer, and they don't realize they were under such duress until they use the product. And when they do, they're able to say, okay, this is important, this is valuable. That's really like, that's the value prop that we've found, is if you can like turn it from a nice to have into a must have.
So we go out, and Courtney can go into some detail. We go out and do, on-site demos and experiments so that they can experience the value that you're describing, or our take on the value that you're describing in their contexts. How do you test drive that with your market? Again, I'm flipping the script. I'm sorry. You can flip it back on me anytime you want.
No, it's good. This, it's not a Multitude Insights podcast, so it's fun to kind of just riff on like state of play in the industry. But we do pilots a lot too. I think, Courtney, like these people, to your point about like trusting and not knowing your name, like they want to try your tech out. I think to make sure that both parties are happy, you have to set hard lines in the sand. If we accomplish X, Y, and Z, this will convert into a contract. This is not an open-ended pilot. I need your buy-in that you're going to actually use my stuff. I'm checking in on you on week 1, 2, 4, and 6 to make sure that you're actually using the product. And if I'm not seeing logins, I'm going to be asking why, right? And I'm going to be coming out to your job site and actually checking it out. So I think we do some pilots, probably not as many as we should. Our tool benefits greatly from network effects. So as we gain density, we have really strong density here in New England. We're gaining really good density in Southern California, San Diego, Orange County, those areas. As we gain density, like it starts to sell itself kind of through that referral network. So it's a little bit of a mix. But so you guys are doing the pilot thing too. That's working.
Yeah, we're doing some. Farsight we're very fortunate with that. I mean, I can bring it out to a demo, and they can use their drones, their data. They can fly whatever they want. They can put it in there, so they can go hands on with it and test it out right there while I'm standing there.
Yeah.
And yeah, some still would like, a demo kit for a couple weeks or whatever. But yeah, it's really, to be honest, it's not necessarily to actually prove the product. We can do that right in front of them.
What we should do is a little Reveal Multitude partnership, and now be able to distribute that data and send it across the wires. So always looking for partners, guys.
Love it.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. We're both venture-backed companies. I run a venture-backed company. Garrett, you guys obviously do too. What's how did you sell this pivot to your investors? Like, this is a different thing than DoD off the bat, but how do you say, hey, I shouldn't say pivot, but the expansion into public safety? And how has that landed? Has it changed the investor makeup and who's interested in investing in Reveal?
Yeah, I would say that, our origin and the focus of our business is still primarily the defense industry, right? And Courtney, I'm sure, feels spurned and under-resourced and neglected and everything else.
She won't say that on a recording, Garrett.
No.
I mean, that being said, I mean, the one of the strategies is to run a low-grade kind of pilot around an industry until you definitively find product market fit, and you dial in the sales motion, and you've got the customer engagement recipe, real tight, and then you dump resource on it. So, we're likely in the process of adding resource to our law enforcement go-to-market, and to the extent that there are deviations in product, adding, engineering and kind of product development resources there as well. So this is not, I don't think the long-term split between defense and public safety focus will stay what it is at Reveal. But you asked, how did we sell that expansion to our investors?
Was it an explicit thing? Was it just, hey, we're growing organically into this new market? And then the kind of derivative question, Garrett, that I'm selfishly curious about is we are a 99% focused on public safety. I have to make the case every time I go for a new round of funding. There's probably prospective investors listening to this podcast that are interested in the space. Like this space, public safety tech, is growing on the tails of defense tech.
Yeah. So maybe to pull the curtain back a little bit, defense technology has not been of interest to the venture capital ecosystem for very long. And before that, it was during the Cold War, right? Like it was
Truly.
The venture capital industry actually grew up as a result of intensive government defense and aerospace contracting from the 1940s through the end of the 1980s. And there was a little bit of a tail as it consolidated and fizzled a bit in the 90s during the peace dividend, post-Cold War and all that stuff. And so from the early 90s on, the venture capital industry, the risk capital deployers, reoriented their energy in a time of peace to what became the internet and what became kind of social media, connectivity, cloud computing. Everything that came between like 1991 and 2015 was the result of having an incredible amount of stability and peace in the world, so that risk capital could be deployed in interesting and creative ways. Everything from like dynamic, interesting new energy production to social media apps to dating apps to cloud computing and smart telephony and everything else. Right. So, but what happened is that in the mid 20-teens, I think the United States in particular, but many in the West, woke up to the idea that there was a rising alternative in the world from a geopolitical perspective, and that's China. And it's also kind of a revisionist complex of other powers, to include Russia, North Korea, Iran, others, that were looking to, take advantage of the relative peace instilled by Pax Americana and, throw some weight around and redefine how the world worked. And because of that, the United States kind of woke up to the reality that they need to reinvest in a next generation of defense technologies. Like, no longer were we fighting the desert wars of the 2000s and early 20-teens against relatively medieval, backward insurgent terrorist forces that were relatively low tech. We're talking about the potential of confronting the PLA over the Straits of Taiwan, and that is a technologically advanced adversary.
Logistically complex war.
Intense in a way that this generation has never confronted, and that only prior generations confronted in the kind of, again, the hypothetical Cold War context, where you're planning to fight against, columns of Russian tanks rolling over Eastern Europe and NATO, right? So anyway, I know I'm on a bit of a ramble here, but this is important because the awakening of the defense technology ecosystem came about because of the emergence of geopolitical pressures that put policymakers on the back foot, that then drove and inspired innovation in a way that we hadn't seen in a very long time. So starting in 2015, 2016, and certainly by 2017, you started seeing the early next generation of defense technology upstarts coming out of, the ether. And now you've got almost household names in the multi-billion-dollar defense platform category, folks like Anduril Industries and Shield AI and Hawkeye 360 and a bunch of others. And it's regularly making, national level headliner news, the investments and activity that's going on here. And I think it's only going to intensify for the next few years as, a new Trump administration starts throwing its weight around, and the Silicon Valley nexus comes to the fore in the form of Doge or whatever that ends up being. And the revitalization of the U.S. national defense arena is important. So I actually think that over the past few years, it's been relatively easy. I'm not saying it's easy, because raising venture capital and doing the entrepreneurial thing is not easy, but I think it's been relatively easy, given all that context, for a company like ours with a defense focus to tell a compelling story, cast a compelling vision, talk about an enormous and growing TAM, right? The global defense and public safety spend is something like $1.5 trillion annually, right? It's massive. But like you said, the public safety arena, I think, hasn't yet caught up. Like it's a trailing indicator of the innovation kind of appetite. So my investors are interested in the idea of expanded TAM beyond defense and addressing so-called dual use markets, maybe enterprise and commercial, but certainly law enforcement. So again, it's been a relatively natural fundraising thesis for our company. But you guys are coming at it as sort of like the first and early part of the wave of law enforcement and public safety tech. So I can imagine that process being a little bit more involved and a little bit more of a struggle.
100%. And I'll like to see how this jives with what you guys are seeing. But defense tech has been like the hot thing in venture, and especially in the last like 3 years, right? It's blown up. A16Z standing up the American Dynamism Fund certainly didn't hurt doing, big awareness. But I have seen the knock-on effects, as you mentioned, wherein in the first rounds that Multitude raised, we were primarily family offices that we could convince that they were doing a civic investment.
Sure. Patriotic capital. Yeah, patriotic capital.
Patriotic capital is a great way to say it. Law and order capital is kind of what I called it internally. But now, it's, once a week inbound from an investor sniffing around with a name you've heard, and
that's right,
paying attention. And I do really think that, again, not trying to toot our horn here, but like we're on this edge. There's a wave of new companies, Force Metrics, Paragon, Flock Safety, ourselves, and a few others that are kind of on this, first to market in their respective sectors. I have to explain the market I'm building because we are category building, right? We're not a computer aided dispatch. We're not a record management system. We're this like third thing that they need to have. And it's taking some work, but it's starting to mature nicely. And I'm hopeful we'll see it expand the way defense tech did.
I can imagine that in the same way that we've experienced with defense and the way that we've looked at public safety, the investors on the line who are, call it public safety focused or public safety curious, are attracted by the fact that the tech spend or the tech and innovation market in public safety is probably something on the order of 15 billion-ish a year worldwide. And it's growing at between, depending on where you look, between like 8 and 12 or 13%, right, annually. I mean, we're talking about a $20 billion market by 2030. It's only growing. I mean, it's a growth space in the same way that any venture capitalist, any investor, any risk capital allocators, they're chasing alpha, and they're chasing growth markets, and they're looking at big ones. And this is a big multi-billion-dollar market that's growing.
Yeah, huge. Okay. One of the things I loved about Reveal when I first went there as an intern was it was COVID. And so by default, we were like 100% remote, which I had to learn how to do. It was weird. But Courtney and Garrett, like you're definitely not in the same room right now. Like Courtney, where are you sitting right now?
I'm in my home office in Montana.
In Montana. And Garrett?
Yeah, it just so happens that we're both in Montana, that I think we're 2 of the 4 total employees in the state out of a total company of 50 plus, right? But like we're very far away from each other, to be clear. She's up in the northwest corner and I'm kind of down in the southwest. And what, Courtney, probably a 6-7 hour drive?
Yeah, 6.5 hour drive.
That's right. Like all of New England right there, like in one drive.
Yeah.
But like, let's talk about like a modern company. So like, Courtney's a saleswoman that has to make field trips out from almost the Canadian border. Garrett, you run how many people are at Reveal now, roughly?
I think we just onboarded 52 and we've got 5 or 6 offer letters signed. So we're grown. Yeah.
Yeah. So, 50 plus person company, primarily 100% remote still.
It is 100% remote. I think we'll end up, developing some amount of density. We have the benefit of being a largely software only company, right? We have a secondary product that has a hardware peripheral, but it's contract manufacturing outsourced. And so like we are fundamentally a remote company. There was probably a period there where we might have been an in-person company and then COVID happened, as you referenced, and we made the decision to go remote at least for some period. And then that period just never ended, right? And I think we've been able to build a compelling business around the fully remote configuration. Although there is value in having density in our business, certainly. When you have a dense and growing employee base in a single jurisdiction, you start having influence and impact in, call it, the political arena as in
inside
one way.
The company, or do you mean?
Yeah. So like as an example, companies that, let's just reference like a giant upstart company in our arena that, and Anduril Industries is able to throw around a massive political weight in a very positive way to get important members of the U.S. Congress on board their planning. And they do that in part by like having thousands of employees in a large, really cool office complex in Southern California, or the recent announcement of Arsenal One in Ohio. So that there's benefit there. Also, in person is by far more productive than remote if you can manage it. But we have had the benefit of I'll just call it applying the labor arbitrage kind of tactic of finding excellent people as good or better than people that could be found in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, or whatever, right? But they are living where they want to live, and we're not forcing them to move. And there's a whole range of benefits that emerge there. But yeah, it's I would say that we're figuring it out, like a lot of other companies are in this era, and I think we've done it quite well.
Are you guys? This is something I'm thinking about as we grow. We've just onboarded our 12th person, and I'm trying to think about like culture and how do you keep it going. Garrett, we stole Friday morning coffee. We do virtual Friday morning coffee.
You stole it. Oh, Multitude does it. That's cool.
Yeah.
We're still doing it. Courtney and I just got off it right before this
We just
call.
had it. Yeah.
Awesome. You guys are still doing it, right? Yeah. Are you breaking it up into smaller teams? How are you doing it?
Nope. Everybody
100%.
gathers. It's great. Yeah. I actually think it's pretty great. Even though sometimes, conversations lag a little bit, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like, it's like everybody getting together. Yeah.
Yeah. We're all here. We're people. We work together.
Exactly.
Community.
Yeah. Yep.
It's tough to do though. I spent a lot of time thinking about how do I maintain culture? How do I transmit the ethos I want throughout and I guess what I've come to is I just have to hire really good people. And that's like one of my biggest jobs as a CEO.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think not only do fully remote companies demand a certain type of initiative, rich, kind of independent operator who can wear a lot of hats. But it also kind of like once you get a density of those types in the company, you can very quickly assess if new talent is one of those or not. You develop the pattern recognition around who could and who would not thrive in such an environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a good learning process for us, and I think we've been, again, successful. It sounds like you guys have been too.
Courtney, what do you think makes somebody like I said, a lot of energy into this for me. Like, what makes somebody successful in a remote first company?
So I've been remote for probably 10 years now. So COVID was business as usual for me. And I actually feel way more productive if I'm working from home.
Yeah.
And I only say that because I had a previous employer was like, no, we want you in the office like 1 week out of the month. And I would do that. And I couldn't, people would come by my desk and they just want to talk all day. And I'm like, I don't understand how people work like this anymore. It would honestly stress me out because I would just keep thinking like, I'm going to get home and now have a week's worth of work to catch up on. So yeah, I'm more productive, but I would say, I found the successful tech startups are very intentional about creating culture. They, we have a corporate retreat once a year and, there's you kind of make time. If I'm traveling around the country, I always try to figure out like who from Reveal team lives in this area. You want to grab a coffee, like, yeah, I feel you really have to be intentional. But for us, I mean, I've actually never worked at a company with such good culture. And I think a lot of that is because we are very selective of who we hire. And it's almost always like someone knows someone, worked with them before or whatever. And they can say definitively, because that's always one of the first questions that comes up is, will this person fit in our culture? And it's kind of funny. I noticed that theme with a lot of employees, not just the public safety side and not just me, is the culture is great. And that is more important than almost anything with hiring. You can teach people tech stuff. You can teach people about drones. You can teach people a whole lot of things, but you can't, I don't know, I guess teach them not to suck. I know that's very eloquent, but you really can't. So it's like, let's just avoid that in the first place,
Step one of reveal orientation, do not suck.
Do not suck.
Suck less. Yeah.
Suck less.
Matt, I think it's very easy to think we could be a fully remote company and we're going to save ourselves X amount of dollars in facilities and overhead. And we're going to save all this time, in commuting, and it's going to be so much better. And that all those things are potential benefits of being a fully remote company. However, we've found that in order to do this thing right, we still have to spend a lot of time and energy and resources and yes, money to ensure that we have the cultural connectivity across the company that we do. And so Courtney referenced convening for an annual retreat. It's one of the best events of my personal and professional annual calendar. I love it. It's so fun. I would go as far as to say that it's critical and necessary, but cheap it ain't, right? Like when you get to 50, 100 employees and you're paying for everybody to convene in a certain location, first you're probably sacrificing quite a bit of productivity in the formal kind of build and sell product sense, but it just costs money, and you know what? That is money well spent. It really is. It's incredibly well spent, and it keeps us together. And some of my co-founders really don't like it when I describe Reveal as having a family dynamic, but it really is. And what I mean by family is not bring your problems home and, bitch at each other over the dinner table and like get all emotional with each other. That's not what I mean. What I mean is it's an incredible amount of mutual support. It's an incredible culture of transparency and communication and unity of purpose and mission. And that doesn't mean there aren't disagreements, but it does mean that we intend every time there is a disagreement to work through it productively rather than canning the whole thing, right? So anyhow, I could go on forever about this. I mean, Courtney's totally right that it is maybe one of the core values that we have, value centers that we've built up in the company.
Yeah. And I'll not to wax poetic, but that, it was my first experience coming out of the military. I was working at Reveal. It was the first private company that I worked for. And I think, you set the model for what I wanted to build inside. So, I thank you for setting that model for me and for Multitude, I guess. That was something that was, you didn't ever say it here, Matt, here's the model explicitly, but it was the modeling of like, here's what we're going to do. And here's how often we're going to get together. And you treated everybody from the intern to the co-founder the same. And, that was something that I took deeply to heart. So thanks for being that for me.
Well, you got it, man. And again, I think there probably are some common lessons learned that could be applied literally anywhere. But I would even say that whatever your company culture, and this is for the every listener out there, I think if it isn't authentic, it's not going to work. And so I genuinely think that the combination of the kind of the co-founding and leadership group set the tone here at Reveal, and it is authentic if nothing else. Even in its weirdness, there's a lot of weirdness.
There's a lot of weirdness. I can attest. I will keep that off. That's a different podcast. Weirdness. Okay, so I want to close here with a question that I've been asking every guest. So make Courtney, you first, and then Garrett with the last word. But what is the most unadulterated fun you've had lately? Yes.
That's a good one.
What's fun right now?
Sledding with my kids. My kids are teenagers and they're, I think they're going to be too old for it soon, but still something we enjoy. And, it's not fun unless you're risking breaking your neck. Right. So yeah, probably just sledding.
We got our first one in, with my almost 3-year-old now. We have a golf course back behind the house a little ways, and got to go down on like the blue disc sled and get after it this winter. Okay, Garrett, same question. What's the most unadulterated fun you've had lately?
Yeah, so I have the great joy of having a lot of fun stuff going on in my life. So I'm not going to hold myself to one thing. Sorry. I have a couple of teenagers, but I also have a 9-month-old baby. And it has been one of the, I'll call it, shocking joys of my life to again enter the parenting phase with a very, very young child. And it's just incredibly joyful, obviously stressful, but so joyful. And like Courtney, teenagers who are going to be leaving home soon, it's kind of, again, joyful and fun to know that I've got at least one who's going to be with us for another 18 years, in the house. So that's been a lot of fun. And then I'll say I have a ton of fun and gain a lot of fulfillment personally around learning new things, and tons of learning, obviously, in our company and the stuff that we do, and which is probably more applicable to the kind of the podcast discussion and the audience. But one of my major life regrets was not learning a musical instrument when I was young. And about 6 months ago, I picked up a bass guitar and started learning the bass, and it's been incredibly fun and cathartic and kind of, to zen out at the end of the day with a little bit of noodling and riffing. And it's been a ton of fun. And I'm a big believer in the idea that your job and work shouldn't be everything, and that you really need good balance in your life amongst family and social and skills and all kinds of other things. That's been one of the joyful, unadulterated, fun things that I've got going on.
That's amazing. Yeah, I wish I had a little bit more music in my life. Sounds awesome. I never pictured you as a bass guy.
No time like the present, Matt. Yeah, I didn't think that was going to be the instrument either. But I mean, if not that, then what? What can you imagine me playing?
I don't know. You seem like a banjo guy to me, but okay.
I do have a banjo. It's on the wall. I tried that 10 years ago, and like it almost worked. It almost took. I might go back to it. We'll see.
Bay Area resident moves to Montana, just screams banjo, or like, acoustic guitar around the campfire. But,
I've got a whole bunch of instruments hanging on the wall, most of which gather dust.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking the time to come and talk with me, Garrett Smith and Courtney Donowho of Reveal Technology. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Love being here and rooting for you guys.
Hey everybody, Matt White here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Multitude Insights, and that's kind of my primary day job. But I started this podcast because I wanted to have conversations with the people that I found interesting. So that means the people on the front lines in law enforcement. It means the investors investing in companies, building in public safety. It means leadership and all the people that kind of make this thing work. Right. So if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, the follow button, whatever it might be on whatever platform you're viewing this on. And I'd love to have you along for the journey. Talk to you soon.